As digital skills become essential for economic growth, many diaspora communities are turning to tech education to secure better futures. Organizations and initiatives around the world are stepping in to address skills gaps, creating new opportunities and ensuring that the diaspora could participate actively in the digital economy. Now, understanding these strategies behind the efforts offer valuable insights into how we can build a more inclusive and technologically empowered future. Joining me to discuss this in more detail is Rukayat Alabi, who is CEO of RKY Group. Good morning, Rukayat. You're most welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. Let's begin with some of the key challenges that diaspora communities face when accessing tech education today.
Right, thanks. One of the key challenges that diaspora communities face would be access to the right information, to understand the right career paths to explore that's, aligned with their background and that can, help them to achieve their goals as well. So another one would be funding. There's not enough funding for diaspora communities and professionals to actually access tech education because most of these courses come very expensive. Say, for instance, you want to go do a master's in artificial intelligence, for instance, that comes very expensive. So, yeah, those I would say are the most the biggest challenges faced by diaspora communities.
And these are current challenges, or have they always been there over time?
Well, to be honest, I would say that the awareness and the eagerness to actually transition to tech, acquire tech skills is growing rapidly. And, so this has also resulted in more of these challenges becoming more apparent.
All right. And how would you evaluate the current level of tech literacy amongst the diaspora communities currently?
Well, I would say that if I would evaluate it, I would say a lot of people are acquiring technical skills, but what is lacking is still the practical experience that is needed to now, make use of these technical skills they are gaining. There are so many YouTube channels that are teaching different skills and different, tools. There are also so many courses, short courses here and there, but that does not solve the problem because practical work experience is one of the requirements they need to actually stand out in the job market and actually make use of these skill sets that they are gaining. And practical work experience would also come with the soft skills that is required to stand out from the next candidates.
Right, and you're quite spot on. There's just a variety, so much out there in terms of, you could get into this. And it's very easy for you to possibly drown in the wealth of options and knowledge. So what specific tech skills would you advise basically have the greatest opportunities for diaspora members?
Right, to be honest, I would say that's a very tricky question because there's no one size fits all. There are so many of them, like you said, but there are some things to consider when trying to explore these alternative options. So the first one will be the barrier to entry. So depending on the particular location as well, that's, the particular country, say for instance, in the UK, if you want to transition to cybersecurity, which happens to be one of the very, much in demand skills, there's some barrier to entry for this particular skill sets. You need to have probably lived in the UK for a number of years, or you actually need to be a citizen. In some other countries as well, there are some barriers to entry. So one thing I would always say when trying to make that decision is to look at a combination of options. So what's your background? What's your background? What's your interest? And what's your capacity? But if I was to mention, a couple of fields that I would say, are very much in demand, I would say artificial intelligence. Everybody needs, to incorporate artificial intelligence in one way or the other to everything they do. I would also say, the cybersecurity. Cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, emerging technologies, IT projects management, business analysis as well, process improvements. All roles at the moment requires a little bit, of process improvements because no one wants to employ someone who's not going to make things better when they come on board. Everybody wants automation, digitalization, and they want people who come on board and are able to grow with the business as the business also explore their own process improvements initiatives.
All right, absolutely. But what about geographical and economic factors? You just touched on certain locations. You could be in the UK and there's certain factors there. How do these two combined factors influence access?
Right. So very much like I said earlier, the geographical location is also very important. If you look at Nigeria, for instance, so you look at internet access, right? Internet access, power and all of that. And if you look at different jurisdictions, different countries also have their different entry requirements as well. So yeah, geographical location plays a very big role. But one thing I would always say is that regardless of where you are, there are skills that, you can use across all of these locations. And working on yourself, acquiring tech skills, regardless of what you want to use it for eventually, is very key, because that can't be taken away, from you. So there are skills right now that even if you are based in Nigeria, you can explore and use these skills in the US. You can use these skills, in the UK. Data analyst, for instance, if you can use the main analytical tools like Excel, Power BI, Tableau, you could actually be in the UK and be working in the US. You can be in Nigeria and be using the same skill sets across different countries. So the world has become really small, and which is why tech skills and tech education is very important.
Well, you mentioned something very important earlier. You said, there's no one size fit all. Basically, you acquire the knowledge and then you see where it fits. But when we're looking at optimal results, I'm pushing you against the edge now because you mentioned something. What strategies have you seen work when it comes to digital training for diaspora communities?
Right. So one thing that works, like I said, is not just about the technical skills. It's about exploring alternatives that also include mentoring, coaching, because mentoring and coaching is also very important, as well as supportive communities. There are so many training institutions out there. However, some of them do not understand the unique challenges of diaspora communities. They don't understand their unique needs. Right, to understand how to now position them when they've acquired these skill sets, for the markets, for the job markets, based on what their previous background was, what skill set they are coming with, what they need, best to move to the next step, which is what we do at RKY Careers, because we understand what the unique challenges of diaspora and, communities are from back home. We know the skill sets, we know how, maybe the roles have been placed on their CVs and what they have learned, from us, and how they should now put it, to now get jobs out there, which is why we have a very good track record of success stories. So having a supportive community is very, very important, and that would make you 100% job ready.
Let's talk about that a bit more. That's your work at RKY Group. In what ways do you administer this? So, of course, you've spoken about mentorship. In what ways intrinsically, for instance, if I were, a diaspora member, are we looking at remote, mentorship? How do you do it if I don't physically have the time to actually engage in digital training?
Right, thanks. So all our trainings are remote and they're practical experience focused, because in the global world, it's not just about certifications, degrees, and all of the, all those that are on paper. It's more about what can you do when you roll your sleeves. Can you get on the job today and roll your sleeves? If you go for an interview in the UK, for instance, if they interview two candidates, one person has a PhD and another person can actually do the job, the person who can do the job, who don't even have a degree, is likely to get the job, compared to the person who has a PhD, who's stacked, loads of degrees and all of that. So what we do at RKY Careers is to ensure that we don't just train people, we also, make them 100% job ready by giving them practical work experience. So in our trainings, after the classes part is done, we have the work experience phase where they actually work on clients' projects from the start to the finish to gain the practical work experience. And after this, then we optimize their CV and LinkedIn for them, because these are the platforms that you now use to actually get the attention of recruiters or potential employers. Because most of the time, people pass through trainings, they learn across different platforms, but they don't know how to put it on paper. And the paper, what's on your CV, what's on your LinkedIn, is what represents you when you are not in the room. So what we do is that we optimize even their previous roles, that they are bringing from their previous countries, which might not have been, optimized for the new location they are in. We optimize it for their location, adding also what they've learned from us, which is the new tech skills, emerging technologies, to it as an advantage, plus the practical experience they gained with us as well. So we make them 100% job ready. And we don't just stop there. We also bring in different coaches and mentors to support them, to be part of their process to get in a job, which is why we have loads of success stories, because when they get to interviews, through what they've passed through in the projects phase of the boot camps that we run, they are able to actually answer the scenario-based questions like, how do you work with difficult stakeholders? They've actually worked with difficult stakeholders on the project. So even if you're trying to get an entry-level role right now, they still expect you to have a certain level of experience. So that's why we actually have, we have a good number of success stories.
It sounds quite hands-on, and I want to ask another which I would like you to respond to very briefly before we move on to the next question. You spoke about certain climes where he who can get the work done is who gets the job, right? But then you also have markets that prioritize paper qualifications. If I don't see that you have a certain qualification, you don't even get a chance to get into the room. How do you approach that and administer your training for those kinds of climbs, that is?
Right. So certifications are still important. We still encourage our students to go ahead to get certifications, but the work experience comes first. Because if you have certification without work experience, you're likely not to get in the room at all. However, if you have work experience, you're likely to be considered for the role, and then you can now go for your certifications as continuous developments move. Right. Also, which is where the barrier to entry come in. There's some fields that, yes, if you don't have certain licenses, certification, and all of that, you can't even get in. So which is why those would not be your own alternative, right? Based on your unique situation, probably you're an immigrant, you don't have those licenses, or it's very expensive to get, or you've not lived in that particular location for the number of years that you need to, which is why we focus on courses that we know have easy entry, as well as we know we can guarantee you all that you need to actually position yourself as an expert as soon as you're done. All
right, fantastic. Let's talk about impact measurability. At the end of the day, it comes down to that. In what ways do you measure the effectiveness of your initiatives for the diaspora?
Right. So one of the main way we measure would be, ability to the job placements. So that's why we have 1,700 success stories of people who have actually passed through our boot camps and now landed their desired roles. So we have people like, moving to the UK, for instance, having to settle for some jobs that are like menial jobs and leaving those jobs after our boot camps to get like jobs that pay them 70K per annum. 70,000 pounds per annum, 80,000 pounds per annum. This is the reason why we do what we do, to make sure that, people don't just settle for less. So yes, ability to place people into their desired roles that, it pays them well enough, allows them to work remotely. Also, some of them are even able to monetize these skill sets by starting a business. So we have some people that pass through our boot camps, and after that they set up their own consulting company to offer the services of the skill sets they've learned through our boot camps. So these are the main ways that we measure, the success.
Yeah, so long-term results are very key.
Very
it
key.
Sounds like that. Let's look at the wider, any other wider external influences that could impact your work. Let's look at policy changes. In what ways would you like to see better policy that could support tech education for the diaspora communities? What would you like to see?
Right. So what I would like to see is probably more funding, because there's a lot of, funding, and there's a lot of funding out there, but there's some that diaspora communities do not qualify for because they are not local. So more funding tailored, to the diaspora communities, probably even not necessarily from the governments of those countries, but probably from, bigger bodies that's, from other organizations, private organizations, more funding, awareness, as well as initiatives that allows people to be given chances, regardless of whether, they've been in a career path for a very long time or not, because we have a lot of people that don't give career changers opportunities to get the job. The same way we have organizations that ask entry levels to have at least 3 years of experience, even though they're like entry level. So yes, favorable policies would also
So you reckon these will make very sizable changes there, all right? If you're just joining us, I've been chatting with Rukayat Alabi, who's CEO of RKY Group. Rukayat, many thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again very soon.